I call to order the special meeting of the Cincinnati Public School Board for today, 11/7/22. Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Ms. Bolton? Mr. Craig?
Here.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Here.
Vice President Jones?
Here. We welcome everyone today and request that everyone in the audience please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Members of the public who wish to speak may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your requests for 5 minutes. Please submit your name, your affiliation, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a direct response to any questions you might have. So before we start the agenda with the superintendent updates, I just wanted to share with our public that we ask for your prayers for President Lindy, who has his dad is gravely ill. So we're going to carry on, and we pray for him and his family, please. Okay, Superintendent Wright, any updates?
Yes, my only update for tonight, Board Vice President, is tomorrow is a really important day. Tomorrow is voting day, and so we encourage all of our registered voters to exercise your civic duty and responsibility and vote. So we'll be out early in the morning, making sure that we are out and supporting. We do want to thank CFT for leading 2 of the sessions that we've had around making sure that the presence is known in the community around the support for Cincinnati Public Schools. So we look forward to your support as we're going through the process, as we're going through voting tomorrow. We are really asking for the community to continue to support us as you've done in the past. That's my update for tonight.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, the next item on the agenda is to really, as we've done in every meeting, every one of our business meetings, we are giving just an update on our priorities through November the 8th. And we are on track. And we want to make sure that we go over each one, let you kind of know where we are with it, and continue to educate the public about what we're doing with these priorities. So our first priority on next steps on governance, implementation timeline with the Council of Great City Schools is on track. The final goals and guardrails have been informed by our community through our community engagement sessions. So, and they have been adopted. Now we're still waiting to receive from Council of Great City Schools sort of the compiled information, and we will take a look at that and move on to the next step of beginning to think about the strategic and plan out the strategic planning process. The strategic planning process itself, for us, is we're on track with it. Again, it all is contingent on how quickly we move through the review of the goals and guardrails and the community feedback that we got. But we are on track with respect to the strategic planning process. Transportation, let's see what winning looks like. So it looks like that the 2 things that we were working on is the percentage of students with less than one or no more than 1 transfer when they ride the bus, and then the percentage of riders who arrive on time for school. And that continues to be a work in progress. We'll continue to update the community. Our superintendent and her team continue to work to improve those percentages, but we will continue to let you know as we proceed with that. The levy, the school levy, that's tomorrow. So we will know tomorrow, hopefully, what the status of that levy is. And we believe very strongly that we've had a good levy campaign, and we anticipate that it will pass. So we look forward to that. And then finally, strengthen community relationships and improve parent engagement. Um, we, in this process of talking with our community about our goals and guardrails, we thought it was very important that for us to collect the feedback from our communities. And we intend to evaluate that information in the event that we need to edit or update goals and guardrails. But the intent of that is to really be a process that informs our strategic planning process. So we are on target with all of our proposed priorities, and we look forward to continuing to share with you, our community, where we are with that process. So, given that, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing the public. Each speaker will have 2 minutes and will direct all comments to the presiding officer. Once a request to speak has been granted, you will be invited to enter. Please click on the camera icon to go interactive. Provide your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you want a direct response to any questions you might have. This request is consistent with board protocol, and we appreciate your help. In the unusual event that someone is not willing to follow this protocol, we reserve the right to end that person's time. So it looks like that we have 2 in-house speakers. Do we have any people on virtual?
We do not have anyone in virtual, Madam
We do
Chair.
not have anyone in virtual. Okay, so our 2 speakers tonight, Derek Driftmeyer, if you want to come forward, and then Julie Sellers will be waiting in the wings.
Hi, my name is Derek Driftmeyer. I have 2 children at SCPA, one in 7th and one in 2nd. I represent a growing group of parents who are frustrated with the ongoing transportation issues and the district's lack of response, accountability, or public action. We currently have about 100 members and we gain new members every day. This issue continues. We also have the support of the American Federation of Teachers and the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. The final straw for me was not the multiple times my 7-year-old was dropped off on the side of Montgomery. It wasn't when my older child didn't make it to school because her bus never came. It was when the SCPA principal emailed me at 5:53 p.m., over 2 hours after dismissal, to let me know that my child's bus was not coming. I responded to the email on October 14th, and he never replied. I emailed Ms. Wright on October 18th. She never replied. I emailed Demetrius Martin, the director of pupil transportation. He did reply and say that he would call me. 2 weeks went by before he set up a phone meeting. I arranged my schedule to fit the meeting. He never showed up. We have 4 basic asks of the district. Number 1, timely, reliable, and accurate communication about bus routes and timing. 2, our children should be picked up every day and delivered to their respective school buildings no earlier than 30 minutes prior to the start of school and picked up no later than 30 minutes after the school day ends as required by Ohio law. Number 3, provide transportation to all students with disabilities and IEPs as required by Ohio law. Number 4, buses equipped with GPS should have GPS enabled during every route so that parents can monitor progress when communication fails. What is CPS actively doing to fix these problems, and when will we have reliable transportation for our children? Thank you.
Thank you. Sellers.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to talk about a couple of things, and several of the things were in the treasurer's report. One of the ones, it seems as if it's the invoice number is exactly the same, and there's 12 changes. And so why are there so many different increases, and how do we get more information about those increases? The second thing is we would like to request a copy of each and every contract of transportation. There were maybe some changes through that transportation and what those costs are, because it seems as if I don't believe the district is getting their money's worth with transportation. From the stories that I've been hearing from the community, it doesn't seem as if you are getting good services from the contract companies for transportation. At this time, I think we need to have a task force with some parents, the board, and some city council people who will have people on the SORTA board to come together and try to figure this out. There are issues with Metro. There are some routes that probably still need to be added. Some areas were able to add routes when others were not able to add routes. But there is still kids across the city who are not able to get to school. This past week, there was a bus that did not run the entire week, so those kids were out of school the entire week. That's not acceptable. And how are we supposed to increase the achievement of our students when they can't get to school? Like I've been saying for the last year, the hardest part of a family's day and a student's day should not be how is my child going to get to school, and are they going to get to school at the right time so that they are in school for the entire day. There's still bus companies who are dropping kids off an hour late, and they drop them off an hour late, but they pick them up an hour late. And just like this parent just said that the kids were not going to be picked up and it was 2 hours after school, every family doesn't have the resources to pick their kids up 2 hours later. But as a parent, I would be terrified if I didn't know where my kid was for 2 hours. And that isn't anything that a parent should have to be going through at this time. It's also, I think that kids are, as it's getting darker earlier, kids are going to say, I don't want to transfer. There's another issue, and I think this is why we need a round table, just to figure out some of these issues and really address them, that the routes, the Metro passes end at 9:30 a.m. for kids to get to school, and that if they're in the middle of a transfer, if they miss the first bus or it doesn't come, and if they're out and they're in the middle of transfers at 9:30, their bus card is cut off and they cannot get on the next bus, and so that they won't accept the transfer. And so those are things that I think we're paying for the kids to get to school on Metro, and they should be able to get to school on Metro. So I think that we all need to come together on this transportation issue. The other thing in the treasurer's report that we found kind of disturbing is they have hired an outside agency to do teacher evaluations for 19 people at $70-something thousand, but yet we have cut those positions within our district. So that is a contracting out of our positions, and we don't understand why or how this is happening. So if we could find out more information about those contracting outs of positions, I'm not asking for things that are extra above our contract. I'm just asking that it's respected. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. I do want to take a point of privilege at this point, since it's been a while that we've done that, and especially because we only had 2 speakers and one spoke for 2 minutes, and Ms. Sellers spoke for a little bit longer. We do, as a point of privilege and courtesy to Ms. Sellers as the CFT president, we do allow her to speak for a little while longer. We do on occasions have to ask her to make it a little shorter, but I wanted to make sure that people understood, because the bell did not go off. The bell did not go off at 2 minutes, but everybody, when they come to the podium, we respect their right to share their voice, and we want to make sure that everybody is heard. So thank you all. Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the October 24th and the October 24th special meeting and the October 24th business meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, so we're at the item on the agenda for committee reports. We have the Policy and Equity Committee.
Thank you, Vice President / Acting President Jones. The Policy and Equity Committee met on October 21st, 2022 for our special Halloween edition of Policy and Equity. And the committee is comprised of myself, Ms. Bolton, and Dr. Moffitt. And we discussed a number of things, so I'll dive right into it. A few of the things you'll have an opportunity to vote on tonight. First, we granted alcohol waiver to Kilgore for their 100th year birthday, which is very cool. We talked about that and voted on it last time, so hopefully their party will be a lot of fun. It'll be Friday, November 18th, 2022. I know you're all invited, and I know that they will have beer and alcohol. We had a continued discussion about the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between school resource officers and the Cincinnati Public School District. There were no real updates, so we moved on pretty quickly. But just like I noted last time, we're going to continue to bring it up, not every meeting, but especially as the MOU comes up to be redrafted. And once the state legislature gets their act together, LOL, will on their most recent bill about curriculum and how social studies teachers are going to have to talk about police officers and students relating to one another. We'll talk about how we may be able to amend the MOU at that time. Policy 2261.01, parent and family engagement in federal programs. You've heard us talk about this a lot in our policy committee. It's a pretty extensive policy and pretty best practice in how districts and parents would interact and engage with one another. It's very germane to our district because we have a lot of federal programs in our district, particularly Title I. We went through that policy. We looked at it. We're going to bring it back November 10th, which is this Thursday, at policy to continue talking about. And if you remember last meeting, I noted that when we get finished with all this community-facing policy work, and the ones regarding parents, community engagement, et cetera, we're going to wait until they're all wrapped up and then bring them as a package to the board to vote on, ideally in December, I think, before the next organizational meeting. If not, then it'll go into next year. Policy 7500, this community learning centers. We've had some great discussion about this. I won't bore you because we talked about it a lot the last time. But again, we're going to bring it up again on November 10th, continue to look at it. Grateful to Ms. Bolton for a historical perspective on the community learning centers. She's our historian now on the board and young at heart. Policy 9140, parent-family engagement. Assistant Treasurer Scott updated the committee on recommended changes. The action, and Ms. Davis, this is my fault. The action says that it would be here tonight to vote on, but that's while it's ready, we're going to wait and save it until we can lump it in with all the other. So that was my bad. I didn't catch that the first time. So we do have recommended changes. Nothing too dramatic, but again, we'll bring that. We bring all of them to the board. 9142, Local School Decision-Making Committee, same as everything else, and we're continuing discussion on November 10th, this Thursday. New policy 3133, remote work. This is an interesting one because it would be one of the first in the state. Actually, I think it would be the first in the state. We had one version, we had a completely different version, and on November 10th, this Thursday, we will talk about more versions. There's a lot to iron out and to tease out. Some of the highlights from this meeting were the committee talking about security being paramount, secured servers, who has access to the district servers. If upgrades are made to computers for employees working from home, we should pay for those upgrades. Who pays for internet services? You can see we're really trying to, policies aren't going to address everything, but we want it to be as tight and as good as possible before we bring it to everybody here. So we're taking that one seriously, and once again, CPS is leading the way. Policy 3231, outside activities of employees, some minor revisions you will see tonight, and you will have an opportunity to vote on that policy. You will also note on your agenda, you'll have an opportunity to vote on rescinding a duplicative policy about outside activities of employees. Excuse me. Policy 5410, this is maybe the most interesting, and we talked about it a long time last meeting, so just as a reminder, This was promotion, academic acceleration, and retention. We have split these into 3 different policies. And we rescinded a few things last time, cleaned things up. We're going to work on it and bring it to you. We'll discuss it this Thursday. I don't have a crystal ball, but I feel like this one may be ready, hopefully after Thursday. If not, we'll keep talking about it. But I think they're really, all 3 going to be really important. Academic accelerate. And then I brought up at the end under other business, there were 2 other businesses. That sounds terrible. One was, I asked if at our next meeting we could talk about what our current policies in place are, if any, and the process after a threat is made at a school. I don't think it's any secret, in the news, this is sort of been happening nationally. It's not unique anywhere of student threats and nothing actually happening, but just people posting things on social media, et cetera. It's a sad sign of our times, but it's real. We do an excellent job at CPS, all bias aside, keeping our kids and families safe. So we're proud of that work. I think the committee just wanted to see, what is that process? What happens if a student does that? And then another piece of business from Ms. Bolton. She inquired about policies for summer school and the various practices that exist among various schools. And so we'll discuss those items this week. I present the minutes as written.
Thank you. Do board members have any questions for that report? Okay, thank you. So we have our next report from, who's next? Budget and Finance. That would be you.
That's right.
Mhm.
Most of the minutes we'll really not deal with because we're going to have 2 stars present to us a little bit later in the meeting regarding the 5-year forecast. But beyond the very detailed presentation of the 5-year forecast, a number of things I'd like to draw attention to for members of the board and the public. One, of course, as we always say, the summary and some of the highlighted areas of interest from the finance folks is the financial overview, and it lists about 4 or 5 items that you might want to review on the first page of the minutes. And then also an action item to bring forward to you is that the treasurer is going to be preparing a rather significant and relatively detailed presentation for the full board regarding the Cincinnati Preschool Promise and some of the financial challenges that are there facing the district and facing that great movement of, I think, having the most extensive preschool programming in the state of Ohio. And then also we had, again, a continuing update regarding the ESSER funds and the amount that is available. And then we had a rather extensive presentation, as I've mentioned, on the 5-year forecast, which you were going to be hearing a lot about in just a few minutes. Several pages later in the minutes, on page 9, in response to the committee's efforts, and after that, the committee did ask, after the 5-year forecast, the impact or the planning that there might be regarding the inflation and growth, if you will, regarding how that impacted the 5-year forecast, and we received an answer to that. We also heard after that if we were not planning for enough inflation in that program or effort or in that plan itself, the treasurer mentioned then we would have to be cutting. And also another part of that discussion as well, as you might know, is that how shall we start to figure out to live within our means regarding, continuing to live within our means regarding the revenue versus the expenditures on an annual basis. Then we got an update very quickly from the treasurer about the plan regarding the planning committee and planning team as to what the budget development's going to look like this year. And we'll be reflecting on that later in the next budget meeting, budget finance meeting, as well as the treasurer and superintendent are going to be presenting some suggestions and recommendations and proposals about how we move forward And then really for at least only the second time that I can remember, the finance folks, the treasurer presented very in depth, but still needing more explanation, all of the financial data that is revealed in the Ohio report card, which is very interesting. And we're hoping that while I personally have a great disdain for much of the report card, the finance piece allows us some comparative analysis and probably would influence our equity efforts school by school. So this is very challenging, and I would encourage the public and the board members to look through some of that financial data. It's not only listed by district, but it is listed building by building, school by school, and some very interesting comparative analysis, some of which the treasurer had to explain to us because we are rejecting some of the formula that was used to determine some of the comparisons. It seemed a little bit out of the norm. And then after we went through that, we did a little bit of the current facilities efforts where that is occurring, like at Hyde Park and Pleasant Ridge and the like. And then finally, we made the list for what we are going to be featuring and talking about at our next meeting, which also is on November 10th, right after the illustrious policy committee meets. So I submit and hope for approval, and I really want to second what the superintendent said as finance chair. Please vote for the levy tomorrow.
Thank you. Do board members have questions of Ms. Bolton? Okay, so the next report is Member Weinberg, Health and Safety Committee.
The Health and Safety Committee met on Monday, October the 24th at 3 p.m. The attendees included the Health and Safety Committee members, the administration staff, and our CPS government liaisons. The presentation started off with Mr. Kearney, Eric Kearney, CEO of Kearney & Kearney. He provided the committee with an October 2020 report of all the bills pending. One bill that he discussed or informed the committee about was House Bill 497. He stated that with lawmakers set to return next month, the Ohio Education Association, the OEA, and other state leaders would call on the Ohio Senate to pass House Bill 497 through Manning and Robinson, which eliminates mandatory retention under the third grade reading guarantee. We then further went on to discuss, Board Member Jones recommended that Mr. Kearney, through the CPS administration, provide the committee with a copy of the language for this particular bill. Mr. Kearney informed the committee that he would let us know when a vote would be taken on the bill and the result of it. Further on, Mr. Kearney updated the committee about mental health days. As the chair, I had asked about mental health. He reported that the students would get their mental health days if the legislation passed. He also expressed a concern about the issue getting through lame duck, and Mr. Kearney would keep the committee updated on this particular issue. As the chair, also inquired about a meeting in Columbus, Ohio, with the board and the Ohio legislators in November or December of 2022. We had an action item in which the committee agreed with the recommendation that we would present it to the board and poll the members for their availability to meet. We then moved into a presentation by Dr. Davis on elements of abuse, which included sexual discrimination, harassment, prevention, dating violence, sexual orientation within the LGBTQ+. And we talked about the relevant offenses and the different definitions in our particular, categories, whether it's bullying, harassment, intimidation, sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and sexting. We then further talked about some things that would help in improving, whether it was giving safe school training to our staff and also making available child abuse identification and intervention, dating violence identification and prevention, and hazing awareness and prevention. We also addressed about preventing dating violence and how there are some supports in the schools on how to prevent and manage that. We also then discussed about supports for our LGBTQ+ students, and that we were also starting with staff professional development training to really ensure that our staff is prepared. After that, Dr. Davis also provided the committee with data on, we talked about bullying and the usage of the bully button and how many times it had been pushed. So we kind of discussed those cases And then, as a chair, I stated the importance and brought it up with my other committee members about keeping the Health and Safety Committee as its own entity due to the various topics and issues surrounding the overall health and safety of our students. And as an action item, we agreed that the recommendation, we would recommend approval of keeping the committee at the November 7th regular business meeting. As we came to a close, we also discussed the committee reviewed their work plan and their strategic goals for this particular committee and work plan. And the committee concluded that some of the topics in the work plan may overlap, and that the plan is still relevant to stay as for the year 2023. There were no speakers for hearing of the public, and I submit my minutes as information.
Thank you. Any discussion? I actually do have go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, thank you for the minutes. Just a question regarding the possibility of a task force that's mentioned. Could you describe a little bit more about that?
Where did I state a task force?
Yes, on page 6, the current initiative, next step, preliminary roadmap, creation of a district. Am I looking at the
Say
right
it one more
thing?
time.
Yeah, so I think it's on page 6.
Oh, are you talking about the current initiatives? This came from the administration in terms of what they had planned for the next step. They said that they would do a preliminary roadmap for the creation of the district BTQ+, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging task force. So I would ask Superintendent Wright if she wanted to comment on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
you
go
want me
ahead.
to? You want me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. So as a follow-up to the questions that were raised, when we think about the work that's currently happening in the LGBTQ+ space, there is a lot of work for us to do as an overall district. And so one of the things that we've talked about in that area is not just what we know is happening within the community, but what other supports need to be put in place across the district to make certain that we're serving a population of students that we know is fragile as well. So as a part of this discussion, one of the questions was, what was currently happening for students? And then the task force became the next level to that in terms of getting additional information, what other supports need to be provided, which community partners we would look to partner with. So it would be a work in progress for us in terms of where we would go next with our student population.
Thank you. My interest, of course, is that within board policy and as you mentioned, current practice and what we're doing, I think those would be the parameters within which that task force would be working, and hopefully it wouldn't be, like so many task forces perhaps take so long when we've already done so much groundwork and whatever. So interested to hear follow-up from both you and the chair as we proceed with that.
It also goes hand in hand with the next step work that needs to happen for us around our equity policy.
Mm-hmm.
So the board has done an amazing job with our anti-racism and equity policy. Now there is more work that has to be done on the administrative side in terms of moving those policies forward.
So encourage that and accelerate that as you can. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do. Thank you for the report. I do have a question. As a member of the Health and Safety, I certainly, at the time we had this meeting, I supported it is written in here as an action item to continue with the health and safety. And for those of you who know me on this board, I've always had trouble with distinguishing between what the action meant and what a recommendation was. So my question is around this particular topic, and I understand the rationale for it. Would it be possible, I'm asking if it would be okay if this would be a recommendation and that we would defer it to the bigger discussion that we're having about the board committee structures and be a topic up under that, if it would make more sense to do it under that umbrella as part of that committee structure discussion. If it goes in, I'm assuming if it's presented as an action and it's approved, then that means it's enacted. And so my question is, can we have a broader discussion about it in that CAL meeting discussion?
I think we did have a discussion at the last CAL meeting, and it wasn't announced that it would be approved here at this particular meeting. So we did have a discussion about it.
But was it approved?
It was,
Was it approved?
yes, to be approved today.
Okay.
I don't know.
About keeping the
Sorry.
health.
I'm sorry, Mr. Morosky?
Are you, so just a point of clarity, are you saying you believed it was approved at Cal that the full board wanted health and safety?
It was presented at the CAL.
I remember
We had
that.
it open for discussion, and we
Yes.
said that it would be approved at this particular meeting.
You had indicated it would be in the minutes.
Yes, in the minutes to be approved for this particular meeting.
I'm not saying I have a problem with it either, but I don't remember the board approving at the Cal saying, tacitly approving that, yes, we would continue with health and safety at the Monday meeting when you presented minutes. That I don't remember.
What was presented, just so, because since I asked the question, what was presented is that the committee had that discussion
Yes.
and that it was going to be presented at the CAL
Correct.
meeting.
Right.
Right.
No, at this meeting.
However, it's coming in as an action item.
Right.
And so my question is, I don't remember us having a vote or having any consensus on whether or not it should sunset or not.
I think when it was brought up, there was an opening for that discussion, and no one said anything
So,
at the
but
CAL
we
meeting.
didn't reach consensus, is what I'm asking. We did not take a vote or agree.
We did not take a vote.
Okay, so the way it's written tonight, and we can go with however the board chooses. If it is accepted as an action item, and these minutes are accepted, that means it's accepted. My recommendation is that we defer it until we have the broader discussion under CAL around what we want our board committee structures to look like. So that we're putting it with all the rest of the committees. That's what I'm asking. And if you disagree, that's fine. We can put it before vote.
I was going to say that I do disagree, but I can hear whatever everyone else has to say.
Yes, Mr. Morosky.
No, like I said, I don't particularly have super strong opinions about it either way right now. I just wanted to clear up that at the Cal meeting, there was not a general consensus
Right.
that everybody would approve it on Monday, but I was under the impression, I knew this would happen today. That I did know, so I'm not confused at all. You
Right.
presented it perfectly, I thought, at Cal. But there wasn't this general consensus, I don't believe. And I certainly didn't give my opinion about it because I don't know that I have one. I do think if we're going to, I don't know when this broader discussion you're talking about is planning on happening, though.
Right.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
So you're talking about the broader conversation about the committees?
Yes, we agreed that at our upcoming CAL meeting, we would talk about board committee structures. That means all of the committees.
Mhm.
And so this sort of is one of the initial steps. Y'all okay? You okay?
Yeah, I'm waiting to
Okay.
say something.
All right.
Get finished.
We're talking about the initial steps of that. It makes sense to me, instead of us doing fragmented things, that this be included in the big picture discussion. And again, it's put in here as an action item, which is one of the issues that we need to talk about as part of our committee structures. What happens when they come in the committee minutes as an action item versus a recommendation?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ms.
Well,
Board Member Moffitt.
I just wanted to read that it says that does say action, but it says the committee agreed with the recommendation and will recommend approval of keeping the committee at the November 7th regular business meeting. So I think that we're arguing over the word recommendation versus action when the reality is that it was a recommendation to come back to today's meeting to stay. We wanted to keep it as a committee. So you're right to say we talked about it at the CAL.
Mhm.
We said that was our recommendation as a committee. It's in the the minutes that we were recommending that. So I really think that I don't know if we needed to talk about it right now at this particular juncture or if it's perfectly fine, but it was a recommendation to the entire board.
Okay,
Yeah, and I knew that.
Yeah.
It was presented that we had agreed to approve it, which we didn't.
No, I think she was, well, what I heard. say
No,
that
that's right. We're on the
committee
same
agreed.
page, totally.
The
Yeah.
committee agreed that we would recommend, all three of us.
Your
The
committee did.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Got it. Yes.
It wasn't,
But not Cal.
it wasn't the board.
Right.
It was the committee.
so I think let me clarify what I'm saying. I see this rather than an action I'm requesting that it be a recommendation to be considered as part of the CAL meeting discussion around board committee structures. So that if the minutes are approved, that item rolls over into the bigger discussion. That's my ask. And if that's not, then we would have to have a vote on this. That's my opinion. Any questions, comments? Ms. Bolden?
I'm sorry.
Ms.
I
Bolden?
just have a couple of questions. Has the Health and Safety Committee met this month?
Today.
Okay, so what we're really talking about is like one more meeting
Next week.
in December,
In
because
December.
at January, we have our organizational meeting, and we might change everything, or we don't usually, but so I would assume that that all we would be saying is that the Health and Safety Committee will, like any other committee, last for one more month.
Or whatever.
Or
decided.
whatever.
Yeah.
But then as that larger discussion where we're trying to figure out, maybe we're bringing it, we didn't vote to get rid of health and safety.
Correct.
And we didn't, at least in this current year, it was voted on 2 years or so ago. So I don't see the problem of having one more health and safety committee meeting. And then, as the vice president is saying, is we have this larger discussion and see if there's then a majority of folks that want to maintain it. And I think everybody's made a good point about getting rid of it, but I think there's been an equally good argument about keeping it.
Yes.
So we're probably having a discussion that
That's what I'm
we may not need to have.
Hold on, Dr. Moffitt, Ms. Weinberg first. and
So I
then
have one
Ms.
other
Farmer.
question, or I guess comment. If we don't go that route, would the route be to vote today?
I think what we have to agree is that the ask was that this action item be deferred and rolled over. We can still safety meetings, as Ms. Bolden said. When we have our organization meeting in January, things could either change or things could stay
Absolutely.
the same. So that's a vote that the committee would have. But what I'm saying is, could we have this conversation in the broader discussion around board committee structure? It doesn't change any of the action that we do.
And so my follow-up question is, if we do not go that route, would we be voting today? If I didn't agree with it, would we be voting today?
You would be voting today, but there's a possibility that it may.
Gotcha.
Board Member Moffitt, you have a question?
I think I'm just wanting clarification as to why we're having this discussion right now, because we had already spoken about continuing through the end of the year. So
Yeah.
We were just, I think it was,
Yeah.
this is premature to me, because we already talked about this. We're going to have one more meeting, and then we are recommending as a committee to keep it together. When we have that discussion, whether that be just, January or December, I don't know, but I just don't think that needs to, what is the issue? The word recommendation versus action?
I'm not, the whole definition of what is an action item that gets embedded in the minutes as opposed to a recommendation. We've not tackled that.
So we need to just change it to, are
A
you proposing to
recommendation,
change
we can
to-
change it to a recommendation. That's what it says in there. It's a recommendation.
So taking out the word action that it's next to and keeping it as it is as the recommendation?
Yes.
I would,
Anticipating that we will roll the discussion over into the bigger discussion on CAL. Health and safety would continue to meet. And then when we have that conversation about the committee structures, very likely that it'll continue. It's just in the context of all the other committees. That's pretty much, that's what I'm saying. Yes, ma'am.
My question is this recommendation to suggest from the Health and Safety Committee that Health and Safety as a committee be recommended to go into the next year.
yes.
Okay. So if it's recommended that it go into the next year, then if we, and I guess this is Vice President's point, we, by voting yes to these minutes, then it would be that the board has voted to keep health and safety on the table for the following year.
Yes.
Okay. And that probably would require a vote, especially if it's an action item, is what you're saying, Madam Vice
And
President.
that's what I was asking.
Okay.
Yes.
And I can't really recall where in the end of one, for the benefit of the public, there's like 5 different calendars we have to live by. There's a fiscal calendar, there's a school calendar, there's all kinds of different calendars. The board does its work based upon the calendar that is the annual regular calendar, January to December. So that's what we're dealing with. I honestly can't remember where we've necessarily, but I don't know that it's ever come up either, where in November or December, we make a determination to recommend that a committee exist because everything stops in January. So and we had agreed to continue the health and safety through this year, which I think was a good thing to do to finish up that work. So I'm just, I don't know if the board would have to vote to do that. And I don't know that you want to do that yet.
Mhm. That's why I wanted, it actually is a request to change the wording, the way it's written. It can be a recommendation. The meeting continues until the board says otherwise, and that would have to be a vote. So I'm not saying let's disband the committee. I'm just saying it's a recommendation. And then my suggestion is we'll just include it as part of our discussion in November whatever CAL or business meeting we have. The first of the year, we start a totally new organizational structure anyway. And everything that we recommend comes to a vote.
So are you saying that this would be discussed at the November, what is it, 16th?
Yes.
But even if we're discussing it on November 16th, it's still, we don't determine something in November for the
Until
following
January.
calendar year.
Yes.
But I think it's a great action item and recommendation. I think everybody's made a case that makes some sense. But none of it goes forward after January unless we decide that at the organizational meeting. All the committee assignments and whether or not it's committee. So I would propose a revision of that word, and then that way it's on the record that we think this should be happening as a recommendation, which I'm very supportive of it. But it's not an action item, meaning we're taking action on something we can't act on anyway.
So we're providing a recommendation.
Yes.
I would stick with that word then, that's
Okay.
fine.
Thank you. So you're offering the minutes for approval with the edit of?
With the edit of removing the word action and staying with the word recommendation.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion regarding that? Okay. Audit committee?
Yes. Audit committee, we have, for the benefit of the public, we have a community audit committee comprised of financial smart people from many walks of life, as long as within the financial professions. And so that committee has members from the finance committee. That's Mr. Morosky and Mr. Craig, myself. And we had the audit committee meets under the same rules as the board does regarding sunshine laws and what have you. The minutes I'm submitting, they dealt with a number of things. One, the assignment of a chair as well, and a vice chair, which is coming up. And so there was discussion about that, and seems to be well in hand as to what's going to be going on. And then also the audit committee over the last 3 meetings, they meet kind of quarterly sort of. And over the last 3 meetings, they've been working about setting goals, not only for the chief audit executive, but also for themselves for discussion. So there was discussion about those goals that they've come up with. And then also it was reported that indeed the state of Ohio has now cited the highest achievement in open and transparent government presented to the Cincinnati City School District, Hamilton County, which is very exciting, and we're very pleased. And it's about, as I think the treasurer reported earlier, last meeting perhaps, on open and transparent government. So we're proud of all the folks at the district that make that happen. Then there's a number of issues about the audits that are taking place, both internally and externally, and they list the audits that are finished. And then also what we did, which is very exciting, and they seem really pleased about it, is that for these multiple focus groups that have been part of the goals and guardrails, fortunately the chair of the audit committee was willing to give us about 45 minutes to present the goals and guardrails and have the discussion, and they participated in it. They much of what they submitted and suggested is in the minutes, and people might find it particularly interesting to see what the audit committee members thought needed to be, what the answers were to what is Cincinnati Public Schools doing that is not working and should be stopped, or what is Cincinnati Public Schools doing that is working. It's very interesting to see that their perspective, and they were very pleased to participate. They're very faithful and loyal to the district and wanting it to run as well as it possibly can. So we thank them for that. And then we did a few other business and district items. I think that is it to submit for approval.
Thank you. Board members have any questions? Okay. So moving on to our final committee report, Board Member Moffitt for ad hoc.
Okay, we had an opportunity to meet on Friday, October the 28th, and we had quite a few community members present from all kinds of different sides of our city. And I'll just go on ahead and kind of briefly read what we discussed. One of the questions that was on our agenda to discuss from before was a list of what schools are not magnet schools, but they are admitting students like magnet schools through the magnet school process. So we did have an opportunity from our Chief Information Officer, Jeremy, to look at a map. He's got these great maps that talk about the 1 mile walking distance, and he outlined the magnet schools, former designation or former classification of schools, what their enrollments are, and the minutes are on board docs. Just to give you an example, we've got 6 schools that they had former classifications as magnets, but they are currently not. So we've got Covedale, John P. Parker, Mount Washington, Roselawn, Condon, Silverton, and Woodford on the list, but he gave a wonderful explanation, and you should come to our meeting so that you can see these cool maps. Another update that we had is the 1 mile walk distance for elementary schools. We did look at a map again that showed 1 mile around the school, and then the neighborhood lines and the population that were contained inside. Our historian is Board Member Bolton, and she was able to provide us with a lot of information on how we got community learning centers and how they came to be for some of our schools. And so that was great discussion. We designed our work plan, and it is not finished, but we did decide that since the administration will be giving us an audit update in December at the December meeting, we are going to use that audit update to do some work. So in December, we're going to have the audit update for our entire district from administration, and then we're going to take each what do we call them? Not quadrants, corridors. So we've got Central Corridor, West and East. And January, we're going to talk about the profile audit with regard to the Corridor. February, we're going to talk about the profile audit of schools with regard to the West. And then in March, we're going to talk about the profile audit with regard to the East Corridor. And then in April, we're going to suggest April-ish, depending upon the audit and how far we get through, we're going to be talking about some recommendations to, in tandem with the superintendent and in working with the community for some next step recommendations to the board. This committee, this ad hoc committee, has a charge of working on elementary boundaries. And so we want to be really, really clear that is our charge and that is where we are staying focused. We have had some community members concerned about high schools, but this particular ad hoc committee is to work with the community and administration to come up with recommendations. Let's see. Our next meeting is going to be December the 7th at 4 o'clock. Make sure you mark your calendars because we are going to have a report from the administration on our audit, our district audit of schools. Excuse me. We're going to explain the process and how we got to the audit. The administration is going to work through that. We talked about the Pleasant Ridge Montessori expansion, discussing that. Excuse me. The district map of the 1 mile walking distance, why families choose to leave our schools, what are the magnets in Montessori schools pulling from, where are they pulling from, outstanding community issues for communities that don't have their school within a mile. For example, Oakley, we had a community member come from Oakley, and that school is not within 1 mile of the community. We talked about that. And then we're going to just talk about our audit. So December the 7th, 4 p.m., I submit the minutes as written and hope for approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've completed all of the minutes. I need a motion to accept all of the committee reports with the edit as specified on Health and Safety Committee.
So moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Do we need a voice vote on that or roll call? Voice, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, Board Member Craig, can you please give us an update on the governance coaching?
Yes. So we had approximately 20 to 22, depending on the exact numbers, because I think a couple of them got broken up, or at least one got broken up, but we had 20 plus sessions of engagement and outreach opportunities where we were able to talk to the community and get feedback. We are now at the stage of collecting that feedback and summarizing it and getting all that information compiled together. The board will also be receiving on the 11th the superintendent's interim goals and guardrails, so we can also have that as part of our conversation. And then on the 14th, you should receive the summary of information and feedback. We wanted to make sure that we were able to, again, still get as much feedback as possible, so we extended the deadline to today for folks who wanted to enter their surveys onto the website. And so, again, we'll get all that information compiled for everybody. And then the next stages will be for us to then take that information at the CAL meeting and discuss the next steps as far as building our final goals and guardrails over the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. Board members have questions, comments of the update? Ms. Bolton?
Yes, I'm not necessarily interested in a lot of the governance stuff that we've been talking about, but, and I don't think that's been any mystery to anybody. But I do find that the focus groups were incredibly useful. And I know that the people that attended generally were extremely pleased that the board members were participating. So I just want to say that because when I'm critical, but I do have to be supportive of the focus group piece. I do have a question though about we assured everybody in those focus groups that this was the work we'd done and these were drafts, and that the community input would inform whatever we did to, whether it's the administration, the board, or together, adjust those or change those or whatever. So I just want assurance that, like I think it was Dr. Moffett that said we wanted to see everything that was contributed as well as the work that the Great City Schools had done to do some of the, combining and what have you. And I look forward to having all of that. And I think the array of organizations and people that participated is also pretty interesting and very good. I want to know if from the superintendent, since what we presented as a draft, these 5 goals and the 5 guardrails, as you are developing the interim, as Member Craig mentioned, how does that impact, how does us getting a more final draft of those guardrails and goals impact the work? Because it sounds like you're starting to do the interim sort of effort, but we're not exactly sure what the goals or guardrails really are until we get all that feedback. I'm just interested to see how you're proceeding.
Thank you. So what I've been asked to do is provide what could be a draft that would go to the board that we would then talk through and come to a consensus or agreement on what those things would be. But it just allows it to be a starting place that we would then use that information to then work through based on the guidance that's already been provided.
Great, because it's based upon the 8 or 9 that I did. I will tell you that there were many thematic things that occurred that would impact not necessarily the selection of a goal or whatever, but with the language or what have you. So it'd be great to be able to get that done as soon as we can to help the superintendent know, so she's not having to duplicate stuff or whatever. But that I'm reassured. Thank you.
Yes, that might be, I think that's a good question and good point to make. That might be a topic of conversation for the Thursday meeting, just so we're clear what direction we're going in with that. Because it was also my understanding, I think probably all of us, that there was a possibility that some of that would be edited. So we don't want the superintendent to go through a futile exercise of putting all these interim goals and then things get changed. Now, I'm not anticipating major changes, but there could be some tweaks in there. So maybe for the Thursday checkpoint meeting.
Yes, and I do know that the general idea was that the superintendent's draft would be, again, something we would still work through progress. And then what we would be really focused on is once we've given, is thinking about those interim goals and how those interim goals also might help shape what we set as our goals, right? And so if there are things that, as part of that interim, that the goal really just seems not to line up with what the community is saying as well, and that these things are maybe not feasible, or there may be other measurements and other things that we can look at. That's part of the reason we would get the interim goals, is we'd be able to understand better as we shape our own goals, give the superintendent that final kind of guidance, and then we ultimately will vote on them at our December board meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, where are we here? Okay. Thanks again, Mr. Craig. We're moving into the presentation section. There are 2 items. One is the strategic plan timeline and process. The other is the 5-year forecast. Now, in my conversation with Board President Lindy, he is asking if there would be, well, I don't want to say interest, but because I know people want to talk about this, and we can talk about the strategic plan. He is asking if we would be okay with deferring it until the next week, because he's here. He's the point person for developing the strategic plan. By accident, not by accident, but his circumstances prevents him from being here. So the question is, shall we defer it, or we can open it up for conversation and discussion? There may be questions or something that we can document if we want to move further with it. So what is the board's pleasure on that? Anybody okay with, go ahead, Mr. Morosky, defer?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm fine.
Okay. Ms. Bolton?
No, I really don't want to defer it. I mean, obviously, we defer the decision, but I would like to have some conversation. The
Okay.
president has presented to us, I think, not two different, but two drafts of a proposal, and it seems to be that's almost part of the record right now. And I think we broached some of this subject the last meeting that we had here, and I have some strong feelings about some of this, and would like to be able to
That's fine.
talk about the model that's been presented, and just philosophically. So if I'll do it real quick, I'll do it as quickly as I can.
Well,
As-
can we
Yeah,
ask just where everybody
anybody
else?
else?
You all okay
I'm
with
sorry,
that?
yes.
Board members okay with that?
I would definitely want to have a conversation.
Okay,
I want to have a conversation. I don't want to vote on anything today.
okay, great.
Uh,
And I'm sorry.
Oh, poor thing.
Okay, so we'll open that up for discussion and any questions that you all might have. Go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
Yes. As Ben points out, as President Lindy points out, we began all of this in June when we first met with the Great City Schools folks. And as you've mentioned, and Mr. Craig mentioned, on December 4th, that whole phase is somewhat concluded when we vote on the adjusted permanent guardrails and goals. So what's in question is December 4th through the other several dates that are important to us. One of the several endpoint dates is the May 5-year forecast vote, and then the June FY24 budget. So we have from December 4th to the end, because we all said we wanted this to inform our budget and inform our 5-year forecast. I mean, that goes back. There was consensus. So my issue and my question and a point of view is that we know that the superintendent and her folks are going to be working on from the evolving goals and guardrails to the final goals and guardrails. And my personal preference is I would like the administration to do that part. I want the experts to do, we talk about roles. The role of the administration is to look at those and tell us what's happening. And that includes not just the instructional part, but some of that financial piece as well. So I still think, though, that since our strategic plan has concluded of last year, that we need to have a strategic plan, and this is part of that strategic plan, the goals and guardrails. So what I would propose is, as the administration is working through the goals and guardrails with their vision and their implementation plan, I would think that, very frankly, the board could probably take a little bit of a break in January or so. But I think in February and March, we ought to go out to the community, however that means, and I mean school communities as well, and engage in the larger issues of a strategic plan. We have not changed our vision and mission since 2014. That's something we have to deal with. These guardrails and goals are specific and good and moving forward, but there are big questions we have to answer too. We have to answer the issue of growth. We have to answer family involvement. There are big things as part of a real strategic plan. And I'd like to engage the community, and I think the board should be doing that those couple of months. And then by April, we would then be kind of in the place where it would start to inform the budget development, which is started in October, frankly. I mean, the planning indicates that you guys are already starting, rightfully so. But by April, then we could have some sort of a draft of a strategic plan that could inform the May vote on the 5-year forecast and the budget vote on the end of June. So I'm proposing that we not mix and match the roles. The roles of administration is to think in terms of implementation. The role of the board is to help gather more engagement, and especially as it pertains to the larger issues of the strategic plan. And then that way, the financial piece the path that we choose would be reflective. And we could get it done in this year, especially when you think we spent so much time in engagement in the preparation for this superintendent search, and now these fabulous focus groups that we've had. And I know there's an interest in school communities to be able to participate. That came up in a couple of focus groups where we'd like to ask some of these questions of our schools. But that's what I see as a calendar, and not mixing and matching. Like, I give it to the administration, the experts, to develop what they think would be the implementation plan, get us to react, but we do the engagement, and then we work together, administration and board, to develop a budget and the 5-year forecast.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Other comments?
I think this is more of just clarification. So Board Member Bolton, if you're looking at the Microsoft Word document where it says the strategic planning, are you suggesting that where it says January, March, how it says that the superintendent will create a core team? So are you saying instead of her creating a core team, you're wanting the board more to be involved in that particular aspect?
I've been so moved by, first of all, the quality of the engagement we had for the superintendent search, and this double whammy, if you will, on these focus groups, that I do believe that the focus group approach, I think that needs to be a board-driven effort, and that the administration do what we can't do. We can only react. We can't design what the experts would be suggesting to be implemented. I just think it gets confused when everybody's trying to do the same thing or sharing. I think there are roles, and I think that's one of the things we're learning through this governance. And the role of the experts is to develop whatever. And I've been very gratified that the community enjoyed having us hear everything they had to say. Sometimes it was pretty uncomfortable.
Right. And I would say that I would agree with you on that, and that the board would do the engagement sessions as well.
Other comments, questions? Anything else? Board Member Moffitt.
You want to write it?
Look, we about
I'm
to give
sorry.
her a mask.
I'm just a little under the weather, but I, as a person who participated in the last strategic plan that was driven by the board and the administration, so I felt like it was primarily board work, but it was really, really good to have it was unorganized. To my colleague Morosky's point that he made last meeting, it felt a little chaotic at times because there were just so many people, but it was really good to engage with the board members. If board members are an extension of the community, then I think that we really should be the ones to help facilitate those engagements with the community. Not to take the administration out at all, but to just put it into perspective. I think that the community should drive that strategic plan, and that we're extensions of that community. And the feedback that we got from our engagement sessions was, I think you said it best, very difficult to hear sometimes, but it was very informative, and the community really liked that. They love the fact that we were very clear that this is not the strategic plan. We will be doing that later. It was really good to hear people and allow people the space to be heard. So, with you on that.
Thank you, Board Member Moffitt. Mr. Craig.
I guess my only question, though, is that what are we taking to the community to get feedback in that January, February time period? Because my concern is if we're asking them what they want, while the superintendent is taking time to build the strategic plan and go through her aspects of running that how much of what we get will shape what the work they're doing, or how much of what we would get needs to be there to shape the work that they're doing. Because I do think, I think the engagement that we've been doing and some of the engagement sessions have been great. I do also recognize that there are some aspects that some folks in our community just don't have the same capacity and knowledge of when it comes to making some of those decisions with regards to the budget and forecast. And so I think if we're doing those conversations to educate and to gather information, I just would want to know what is part of that conversation. Because ultimately we can have great conversations where we get a lot of feedback that asks people to tell us what they want us to do. We've seen that in the past. We've also seen some of the things that folks would tell us that they want us to do that doesn't actually match up to what a school district does. And so, not fully, but I guess not always in alignment with where the priorities that we get from parents and other folks when we do the type of engagement we did recently. So I would just want to know what we were actually using to engage the public, or what information we were seeking to gather as part of that process.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Morosky, anything? Okay. Ms. Bolton?
Mr. Craig asked a really good question, and I know it's the question too that Mr. Lindy was concerned about. We don't want to have two different things being advised to the superintendent. The furtherance of a strategic plan effort in the winter months and informing the financial picture and what have you, that would not impact, it should not impact, if we are careful with our goals and guardrails, what the superintendent is working through. Guardrails are the guardrails, and the guardrails are being, through our efforts and through the community's efforts, the statement of values. The strategic plan isn't necessarily about the community values, nor is it about, how to implement or achieve what it is that we want in the goals and the guardrails, or how to achieve it. It really, a strategic plan informs the board of its work. The guardrails and the goals, and so much of what we've done since June, fortunately, which I think has been helpful, is really defining the relationship between the superintendent and to a lesser extent the treasurer, but defining what we expect of her and her team. And the goals we set there are for her to reach those particular goals. I see those goals and guardrails as the platform from which we launch the bigger discussion. And the bigger discussion for me is that, like the Great City Schools people call the community the owners. We go out to the owners of this school district, which are the people, and that's specifically stated in all the stuff they've been telling us and teaching us in the vocabulary. We go out and we ask the people to envision the school district and to help us create a vision and a mission, and maybe address the bigger questions than necessarily, nothing's more important, but a bigger question about how we design the future and what people want the district to be like, not the goals they want to achieve, and hold the superintendent accountable for achieving. So I think that's what I would say. It doesn't discount them, it doesn't confuse them, but indeed it gives us, strategic plans, having been here when we had none versus being here when we did have one, strategic plans inform the board. And it's the connection between the people who own this district and us. So I don't think it's duplicative. I don't think it's harmful. I think it actually could empower the superintendent even more greatly, because we're concentrating on these things and she's getting the job done on these other things.
Any further discussion, questions, or comments? We did agree we would not make a decision on it tonight. I'm fairly certain that this will be on our agenda coming up either on Cal or the next business meeting after that. I'm not sure what date that is. Question?
Could we look at that as being like December 4th when we've got our final goals and guardrails to make that kind of decision? Because maybe these things will might be clear as to what we have before us.
To receive those?
Yeah, that we don't make the final decision about a strategic plan until December 4th.
Okay, so
Because that time, then you've got your goals and guardrails.
that would be at the first business meeting in December.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have a business meeting and a cow, I believe.
Right.
Yeah, but we can make, if we need to have time for the cow to make that a business, make it a special meeting so that we can conduct business, we can do that. Okay.
I stepped on Mr. Morosky, I'm sorry. Weren't you going to say something?
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments about this particular discussion?
Thank you for having it.
If not, we're going to move on to our presentation of 5-year forecast. Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Vice President Jones. I'd like to introduce to you and to the public our Assistant Treasurer, Kim Hughes, and Director of Financial Transparency and Reporting. I almost said transportation. I knew that wasn't right. Kevin Ashley. And so they will be presenting to you with the forecast for tonight, and it's included in the Treasurer's report to be voted on tonight. We have a requirement to file with ODE by the end of November. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Hughes. Meanwhile, I'm going to hand out the very large print forecast.
Good evening.
Hello.
Great to see all of you. Okay, so as Treasurer Wagner said, this is the 5-year forecast that we do get the opportunity to present to you. And just to give you a little information about it, the purpose of the forecast, it is, in short, an opportunity for us to monitor our solvency. We want to look at our revenue in excess of our liabilities. So we just want to make sure that we're showing you that we are able to pay our bills. Also, it is a narrow focus on our general fund dollars. Also, it is something, as Treasurer Wagner stated, that we have to file twice a year, and it's a requirement from ODE, Ohio Department of Education, and we file it in November and May each year. The factors that influence the forecast, it is the Fair School Funding Plan, it is inflation rates, it's also our student enrollment, as well as collective bargaining agreements that we have within the district. Another thing that's going to influence the 5-year forecast is the CLIF, which is something that our treasurer has been sharing with all of you for quite some time. These are items, impending items that could potentially be absorbed in our general fund. Next slide, please. The 5-year forecast, it is a multi-year financial plan. And what's important about it is that it should not reflect a forecasted negative balance within a 3-year window. So that's something that we work hard not to reflect. Also, it provides board guidance that there should be no new additional levies in the forecast window. Also, some things that are important that we maintain positive cash, some things that help us to do that is our voters and them approving our tax levies. Also, the ability for the district to control their budget and expenditure growth. Next slide, please. Our Ohio Fair School Funding Plan, it was implemented in fiscal year 22, and it eliminated pass-through funding. That was one of the main things that was a part of the change of the Fair School Funding Plan. It implemented the pass-through funding dollars for our community schools for scholarships such as autism and Peterson. Also, it calculates base costs to educate a student that is unique to each district, and this is based on enrollment and FTEs. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a graph of our Ohio School Fair Funding Plan, and this basically shows that the base cost enrollment by grade level grouping is used to calculate the district's total base cost. And this slide We just want to make sure that we are pointing out that this is K through 12 and it does not include preschool. Next slide, please. This graph, it visually shows the state share of the Fair School funding formula. Next slide. And this slide reflects the formula and disadvantaged pupil impact aid, also known as DPIA, the phase-in percentages. And the phase-in percentages for fiscal years 22 and 23. However, for 24, fiscal years 24 and 20 through 27, they have not yet been voted into law. So right now I'm going to pass this over to Kevin Ashley.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to go through just some of the graphs. One of the things I like about these graphs is they give you a visualization as opposed to just seeing the numbers and not really being able to see the trends and some of the changes that have happened in the last couple fiscal years and what we anticipate will happen in the next few. So this graph, as Ms. Hughes mentioned, the forecast focuses on general fund only. And so this shows a revenue visualization for the past 3 years, as well as the current year and the next 4. I'll talk a little bit more about the pass-through funding when I look at the other graphs, but the key thing I wanted to point out here, the high level, you can see we expect our revenues to grow slightly, but the light blue category represents the amount associated with our renewal levies. So since the tax budget, taxes are collected on a calendar year and we operate on a fiscal year from July to June, you'll notice in 24 there's a $25 million effect of the renewal levies if they were not to pass. So that's essentially half year's collection since the overlap of the fiscal year versus the tax year. For 25 and 26, it would be a full year's collection for that same levy. And then for 27, at that point, we would have a half year's collection on the CPP renewal levy, the $48 million levy. So that is what's built in, like I said, a half year collection there for fiscal year 27. Next slide, please. So this one breaks it down a little bit further in terms of taxes and property tax rollbacks. The light blue on this shows the renewals again. Obviously, those are key that we hope the voters will support. The other thing in the green category is a little bit of property tax allocation. One of the things we talked about in finance is the legislature phasing out some of the requirements for homestead exemption. And so we anticipate that could have some effect if that's not changed. Next slide, please. State Aid Foundation. The call out there represents when we went from the elimination of the pass-through funding. So you can see the total revenues in this category did decrease at that time. The other key thing here is related to restricted grants. Just wanted to point out the things that are included there is as part of base cost. We do receive some student wellness funding. It's not separated as it was in the past. And then the DPIA categories here, along with English language learners, gifted education funds, and career tech education funds. Next slide, please. All other revenue, as I mentioned in finance, this is the way the forecast is set up. So we have a lot of categories that fall into this, such as the TIF funds, the Community Reinvestment Act funds, Medicaid reimbursements, E-rate reimbursements, and such. So this just kind of gives a visualization of that, but there's a lot of things rolled into this category. Next slide is an overview of expenditures. One of the things you'll notice here from 24 to 25, there's a little bit of a noticeable bump. And that represents, there's a slide that shows a little bit what the revised CLIF plan may look like. But that bump really would relate to those things coming back as part of the CLIF plan. Next slide. Again, this is a condensed summary of where we anticipate the upcoming revision would look like for the CLIF plan, and this is built into the forecast. For 24, it's about 2.7 million, and for 25, it's about 28.2 million. So I know you guys will have further discussions about those moving forward. Next slide.
Kevin, just 1 second.
Yes.
So on the last slide, the CLIF plan refers to things that are being funded out of ESSER that will then refer to the general fund. Just wanted to make that clear.
This slide, so just briefly, school-wide pool, as most of you are aware, the district has used this plan for a number of years. And for fiscal year 23, the decision was made to move away from that. So in the past, monies were transferred out of the general fund into the pool, along with Title I dollars, and those were used to make all of the expenditures related to schools in the pool. So one of the things we're trying to do here, just to give you a high-level view, is how we went from those being transfers out of the general fund to now what they would look like if we were actually paying salaries, benefits, purchase services directly out of the general fund instead of tracking all of that in the 598 school-wide pool fund. Next slide. For the next 4 slides, it kind of giving you a visualization of that. As we mentioned, it didn't take effect till 23, but what we tried to show here is last year, had those transfers been categorized as salaries, for instance, you can see what the expenditure level would have been last year. And then this shows you the relative growth. One of the things we do as part of the forecast is obviously COLAs that had been approved were included for this year. But for the future years, we're just anticipating step increases at this point, and then of course any other adjustments will come through action later. Next slide is benefits. One of the things Ms. Bolton mentioned was the inflation rates and how that related to insurance. So what we did between Finance Committee and this, we did revise the particular lines related to insurance benefits to more in the 8 to 10% increase category, because we are experiencing, and we took a look at our actual expenditures over the last few years, and as well as Mercer, who's one of our vendors. I believe they provide us some estimates of what they think those are going to be. Also, the treasurer was in touch with other urbans, and I think 8% is kind of a benchmark that they were using as well. So we did build that in for that discussion. Next slide, purchase services. The 2 kind of change bumps here is, again, that's where the pass-through funding was in 21, not reflected in 22 as an expenditure, but also then we weren't getting an equal or slightly more revenue as an offset. For 23, again for 22, showing the impact of what the school-wide pool portion related to purchase services was. And again, 25, you can see a little bump for the CLIF as well. Next slide is other financing uses. Again, the reason this looks different is because that huge 211 million in transfers out is now going to be recategorized as salaries, benefits, purchase services, etc. Next slide, which we think is a really good summary of the forecast, and it kind of hits home the point that if the light gray categories are expenditures, so all the columns on the right represent expenditures, the columns on the left represent revenues. And so you can see, even with our current plan, expenditures are exceeding those annual revenue amounts. And so decisions obviously will need to be made going forward. But if that were to be the actual case at the end of this 5-year period, our cash balance would be in a negative at $54 million. And that's even after the renewals, which are reflected there as well. So each year our conditions change, and we will make revisions twice a year as we go forward. But this is just a good visualization of that. The next slide just has a summary, but I'm just going to pause and if there's any questions or any other concerns at this point.
Do board members have questions? Mr. Craig?
Yeah, so I just had a couple, and I know kind of mixed in throughout, so I will throw these out there too. But I think part of the 5-year forecast has to include what the state will fund towards our funds. And so I know that some of those things have not yet been fully decided. So how are we kind of building that model, or does that model take that as a factor included?
So one of the factors is the enrollment, which obviously will change as we go forward. The other thing is we have a consulting company of experience, former treasurers. And one of the things that they have helped us with and advised is kind of not expecting a full phase-in. Obviously, in a perfect world, we get full phase-in of everything. This forecast will look a lot different. So what we've built into the forecast is more saying what the legislation did for the first 2 years, kind of holding those phase-ins down, hopeful that there'll be more, but realistically knowing there'll probably be less. Do you have anything to add for that?
Yeah, so I just wanted to remind the board that the state approves their budgets 2 years at a time. So the forecasting out 5 years makes it really challenging. We don't really know what they're going to do. And they did not fully fund the formula that they adopted 2 years ago. The first 2 years of that phase-in, we lost about $80 million in revenue. And so we have to make sure that we're conservative on the way they're going to fund that. And you stay on top of what their changes are and continue to lobby to fully fund the formula so that our students can receive the taxes and state revenues that they fully deserve to be educated. And the formula is based on what is it going to cost to educate a child, but they're not going to fund it fully. And that puts a larger burden on our local taxpayers.
And then my second question is really just an opportunity for you all to kind of talk about this. But, and I know my fellow board member, Mr. Roskis, raises every budget meeting, but the gap that the state funding or their lack thereof state funding of our education system puts us in a real strain in itself. And that, can you speak just a little bit again to why that is so important that we have a true fair funding system that actually would fund our district as well as others in a way that's more replicative of what it should be? Because I think that's one of the hard things, is that how much are we not getting from the states over that next 5-year span?
So in the formula, they created a formula that would cost out what it would cost on district statewide averages to educate a child in terms of what are the staffing. And then they used an average salary for those staff members, similar to what we do in the district. The issue is our average salaries are a little bit higher than the state average. And because of our property wealth index, we only get 40 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar that our student generates in the state formula, we get 40 cents. Our local taxpayers make up the difference. And, comparatively speaking, across the urbans, I think Columbus is a little bit wealthier than we are. We used to be the wealthiest of all the urbans. Because of the last triennial update on property values, they leapfrogged over us. But Cleveland and Cincinnati have similar student populations, and they are much more strongly funded by the state than Cincinnati. On an annual basis, I think, if I remember correctly, it calculates to about $250 million.
Other questions? Ms. Bolton?
Just a political comment on that. Cleveland versus Cincinnati, which is very frustrating. Cleveland, as a school district, was taken over by the state. Does not have an elected board. It has an appointed superintendent by, I think, the mayor. And they receive how much more money?
I don't remember exactly what their state funding, so I'll just give you what I know. So 2 years ago, our state funding was at 46% instead of 40% now. When we were at 46, they were at 78%. I don't know where they sit now, somewhere in the 60s.
How convenient. That's great. Thank you.
So, thank you all. Great job. Very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to reiterate that the forecast drives the budget target for the next cycle. And in order for us to maintain a positive cash flow over the next, in that 3-year window, the current year and the +2, have to control our spending. We do that through our budgeting. And so we just need to keep reminding us that any new initiatives need to be funded by spending that we're not going to do. We cannot grow our budget.
No. Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, and I would, I really do want to emphasize the idea of annual revenue and annual expenditures, which we have, we do the best we can, but I think that has to, I know it's impossible, but also if I could ask the treasurer to not think about new initiatives, but instead, because that's one of her mantras, if you do something new, we're going to stop doing something else, which is totally true. But I mean, a complete review, as I'm starting to understand from what you presented and what the superintendent's talked about, is that we just assume because we've been doing it doesn't mean we have to do it. And that before we talk about limiting our new initiatives, especially if we're going to go into the next fiscal year with a strategic plan, we have to have a complete review of whatever it is we're doing and whatever contracts we're giving out. And as you have really been, and President Lindy as well, on the whole return on investment and the assessment and some of these multiple contracts that were out there, even school by school. So I would rather we not frame it new initiatives, we have to cut something else. I think you cut everything that you can, or review everything you can, cut what you think we need to cut, and then we can talk about some new initiatives that will be born of all this work for the strategic plan. Because I hate to see this one column and this other column. Reality, this whole big column has to be completely reviewed.
So just to speak to that as well, and we've been working in partnership on this here at the Information Finance Committee on really how we're thinking through the larger processes. So a couple of different things that are occurring. And this goes along with that overall ownership. One is we've already started the review of contracts across the board. So it's not necessarily an individual contract review by those that oversee the contract, but more so them having conversation with us around the contract, not just that contract at the board level. And so when it's time to talk about those contracts that are, whether it's over $200,000 or even those that are less than that, that becomes a part of a greater conversation around strategic alignment. So I didn't get involved in the conversation around strategic plan, but as we're talking about alignment, we're really talking about strategic alignment. What are we doing at this point? And even though with some of that, we still have to think about how we do some reductions because of where we are currently in the budget. But at the same time, I think it's beginning to socialize across the board that in order for us to move forward with the goals that we're currently looking at any level, it is going to require some really, really deep review and some additional recommendations around what we do next that is uncomfortable. And so I think I've been saying that from the very beginning, getting more and more and more involved into what we're currently doing, looking at projects that we actually like and we enjoy. But at the end of the day, is that going to lead us to where we're looking to go in terms of overall student outcomes? So it's not an either or, it's definitely a both and. In terms of new monies, to your point, not necessarily thinking about it as new dollars, but what are we doing now that we can repurpose for the express expectation of improving student outcomes based on those aligned expectations?
Thank you. Mr. Morawski.
Thank you, Vice President Jones. Just to reiterate something I said in Finance Committee when we got this presentation, that Ms. Bolton also presented in the minutes for that, so this will be the third time I've said it, but I think it's important enough to say 3 times. I don't think it's any secret our financial outlook is always kind of bleak because the state doesn't like our children or our district, or any urban district for that matter, and it comes across in their budgets and how they fund us. That being said, we have a tremendous amount of local support, which is great. I think our levy will pass, and we'll also thank you, and not to ahead of time, not to belabor that point. But I do think it's germane to this topic that we will be renegotiating our tax deal with the city of Cincinnati over this period of time, and having this sort of information when we go into those meetings. And unfortunately, I will not be there Thursday, but this should be a topic for Thursday. It should be a topic for every meeting we have with city council.
Wednesday.
I won't be there either. It should be a topic of discussion every time we meet with the city of Cincinnati. And so I just think it's important to remember that we have, folks, I think, at the city who are amenable to our cause and do care about our students in our district. So I think we have an opportunity there.
Here Thursday. 10th. Yes, it is. It is. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
I won't be there.
Okay. Me either. Okay. Well, we're going to get an update on that, so we'll find out what's up. Okay. Last
To the treasurer. In this 5-year forecast that we're going to be passing, what year are we also talking in terms of the 5 or 6 collective bargaining agreements being needed to be, is it next year that we negotiate?
I believe we have a reopener for the 3rd year of this year. So yes, next year would open up negotiations for the next 3-year cycle. Is that right, Dan?
Uh-oh. Dan's running. Or the treasurer's report.
The reopener with our unions is for for salary only for the 3rd year of the contract. So it's from, for the 23-24 school year salary. And then we have, the contracts will reopen for full negotiation effective January of 24 for starting with the 24-25 school year.
So that would hit the fiscal year 25 in the 5-year forecast.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Because this is the 2nd year of the contract, right?
This is the 2nd year of the contract. We've got a reopener for salary for next school year.
3-year.
Correct.
Most of them. Okay, thank you.
anything else regarding the presentation on the 5-year forecast? And just to remind board members that this is part of the treasurer's report tonight. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to our resolutions. Mr. Morosky, please present the first resolution.
Thank you, Vice President Jones. I alluded to this earlier. I present a resolution amending Board Policy 3231, outside activities of employees. I present the resolution as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Quick one.
Yes.
Just,
Mr.
yeah, I
Brown?
always like to let people know, just it's particularly for the public, this is a lot of just cleaning up, taking out the word professional before employees. So it just says employees and taking out gendered pronouns and just having the employee. Not a ton of substantive changes. And then the next one will be rescinding a duplicative.
Yes, gotcha. Okay, so Ms. Wagner.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Jones, sorry.
Yes.
Don't be absent.
Since I
Get
have it.
demoted.
Okay. The second resolution, Ms. Bolton.
A resolution rescinding board policy 4231. I submit for approval.
Is there a second?
Thank you.
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky? Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Okay, Dr. Moffitt, the third resolution.
I submit a resolution amending Board Policy 6320, purchasing of goods and services. I submit it as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wagner?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Jones?
Yes. Thank you. Announcement of retirements?
There are no retirements today.
None. Wow. Okay. Did you say snap?
That's what he said.
Okay. All righty. I need a motion to approve to accept the superintendent's recommendations.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Bolton.
I'm just double checking. I don't think so, but I did. Yeah, it can. No, I'm good.
Okay. Hold on one second. All right. Second, any discussion? Any further discussion? Ms. Wagner.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Jones?
Yes. Okay. I need a motion to approve the report of the treasurer.
Revised.
Revised. It is revised. Sorry. Yes. The revised report. I need a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And
Any discussion? Yes. Ms.
this
Bolton.
is included, as you mentioned, the
The five-year forecast is included in the revised version. Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Wagner.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
Vice President Jones?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have 3 items under board matters. The first one is presidential responsibilities. I'm not sure. Ms. Weinberg.
Yes, that was actually my topic, but I am going to save it for the next meeting so that Ben can be present and he can be in the discussion.
Thank you. All righty. Second topic, transportation. Added that.
I just wanted to have some more discussion about transportation. I think follow up again as to what was presented by the public. I know that's updating us throughout. I continue to be concerned about almost all aspects of it, except that I know improvement as best as possible. I do want to ask, though, again, about these particular cards that Metro supposed to provide. I've gotten a number of folks saying that the kids' cards, that some of them don't have cards, and then more importantly, these particular, what are they, those sorts of cards we still don't have. And we still don't have any knowledge as to what the unique ridership is from Metro. And I will tell you that to the point that's been raised, I think Ms. Sellers raised it, and then also the parent raised it to a certain extent. This is not good from Metro, even though we don't receive the kinds of complaints regarding Metro as we do regarding Yellow Bus. But one of the major reasons we have an issue about yellow buses is that we put our 7th and 8th graders on yellow buses. And the reason that we put our 7th and 8th graders on yellow buses for the first time in a million years, 2 reasons. One is that by state law, the charter kids and other kids can't be put on Metro, okay? And the other reason was when the Metro stopped doing the extra routes, that's when our families with 7th and 8th graders said, we don't want them on Metro anymore. So it's all interrelated, completely interrelated. And I think that I hope this too is a topic when we gather together with the city folks, because the city folks appoint half of the sorter board. And nearly the other half of the sorter board is appointed by the county commission. And both have majorities of Democrats who are very deeply committed to our kids. And it's just, I know there's some industry problem with these cards, but once again, we're paying for cards that aren't used, or we don't know if they're being used, or how does this work that they cannot have? I just don't understand why we couldn't all, last year, couldn't find out who's writing what because we didn't have the cards.
So I think one of the things, thank you for the question. So I think one of the things, and I was actually thinking about this morning, we do not have RFI cards for all of the students, as I've shared each time this has come up as a question. What we can request from Metro, and our next meeting with them is coming up. My team met with them actually last week or week before, I believe it was as well. And the meeting where we do the entire meeting with the CEO at Metro, with me and with everyone
Very
involved
nice man.
is upcoming. But what we can request at this point is at least a report for those students that do have the RFI cards, because there are students that do have those cards. And they were provided at the very beginning of the school year before they were no longer available. So we can request the data, at least for that population of students, which will tell us that they're getting on the bus. Across the board, I think it's been shared collectively that we don't have a way of knowing that they're getting off the bus. But we would have with those cards, at least that they would have to swipe them to get on the bus because they are specific to the students. The other passes that they use are not specific to the students, and I think that that's your question. So I can make that request to see what information we can get in terms of that, as well as an update on the RFI cards that we're waiting for, because we still do not have access to those yet. Go ahead.
So what can we do to make it, and I know you're advocating, lived through all this last year, we all did. What can we do to make it clear to Metro that we want those cards, or those cards just don't exist anymore in the industry?
No, I don't think it was an issue of overall industry. I think, as I understand, it was their specific supplier or provider that they used the cards for. So the batches that were provided to them were not operable based on the information that's been provided to us. And that's all that we have to go on, is what they're providing to us. And so therefore, the cards were not available in terms of that batch. When they talked to their supplier gave them a window of time before it would be that they could then give them the next set of cards.
And I recall you talking about that several weeks ago, about when that might be, and it sounded like the earliest time there might even be a possibility might be the end of first semester.
That's correct. That was the timeline that we were given. The time we were given was about 12 to 16 weeks, I believe, was the number of time that was given at that time.
Do we know if other metropolitan transportation systems have these cards and are able to use, or is it the technology on the buses that's so inadequate? I mean, this is sort of interesting. I mean, are they made in China?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of it. It's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, that could possibly.
Yeah, I think that it is a combination of things. The RFI cards are not known to just be done with Metro. We did talk to them when we met with them about other suppliers that they would utilize. They do have some technology, as we understand, they do have some technology restraints that will only allow them to be able to use certain resources from certain places, and that's understandable to that level. For example, UC uses RFI cards. There are a lot of places that use RFI cards. Our cards that we use for badges are a form of RFI. So it's not just the badge itself. As I understand, it's their supplier also.
And I recall that you suggested too that maybe our cards, is there any way we can, is that, and apparently it's not adaptable to whatever technology. I mean, sort of spend a tremendous amount of money, tax dollars actually, to update everything that they're doing. And it is confounding to me that we can't get the cards.
Yeah, so there can be some level of adaptability for the card that they get. However, as I understand, that would take even longer than getting the other cards that are being provided because of the resources that they use on the buses. So and their technology on the buses is not as current as it needs to be across the board.
That's interesting.
Yeah, collectively. So that would be a part of it. But what we will do is we have our touch back with them coming up. I believe this is within the next couple of weeks that we have to follow up with them, where we have our next sit down in terms of where we are. We will make the request for at least the information that we can get in terms of the RFI, and also get an update for, when we would have the other resources available.
Last question from me, a request. I would like to request of the president of the board and the superintendent that Metro make an appearance. What this is all about.
Accept the request. We'll also share it with the board president.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Weinberg.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, do we have a guess on the number of cards that we don't have, or the number of cards that students do have?
I can provide that for you. I don't want to give you a guess.
Okay.
I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
You could do that. I am curious just to see how many cards are out there versus how many cards we are waiting on.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on the transportation? It's an ongoing issue, ongoing concern. Since we are about to talk about the city council meeting, one of the questions, why don't we say, let's do an update first, and then I'll save my question for that. And Dr. Moffitt, are you able to give us I know you weren't planning to do that, but can you give us an update on that meeting?
Sure. I'm going to also tag in my partner here.
Okay.
I seem to be having some struggles.
We can
right
actually
about now.
ask him to give the update if you'd like.
I think we can both handle it together.
Okay.
Good start.
Okay. So on November 10th, we are meeting in a joint meeting with the Healthy Neighborhoods, I think it's the committee, from the city as well as the board, to discuss a number of issues that we just wanted to, again, open up a discussion to talk about things that are both on their agenda of the district as well as the agenda of the city, to bring to light. It will be at Woodward at 6 p.m., I believe is when it starts. And again, the hope for this discussion is really just to be an opening conversation. So we're going to be talking about things around things like pedestrian safety for our students, especially. Again, we have some discussions around just general safety matters, as well as dealing with, let's pull up the list here actually, but dealing with a number of issues that are really important to our students as well as to the city, to express what we're doing, and really it's more of an informative session. Communicate. We will also start actually here. We will also have an opportunity to set our agendas going forward from this meeting. So really the other idea is, what are we going to do to ensure the success of the group as we do those collaborations. So I know a couple of ideas have been pushed out already in today's meeting, will be things that will be discussed. Is there anything else anything else I missed?
No, I think this was previously called the ACES meeting for those people that have been around for a while. This was originally between the electeds on city council and the electeds on the school board, and an opportunity to get some common ground issues discussed openly and publicly. That's what this is intending to do. I do see that our Vice Mayor Kearney has added quite a bit more to the agenda than we had added, but we're really just overarchingly talking about pedestrian safety, safety in schools and neighborhoods, workforce development, absenteeism, which was our president's topic, and then homelessness. And there is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on things that are of interest to you all. And so we do encourage you. It is going to be on city cable, and we do have Blue Jeans capability, right? So this is just like a regular meeting. It's been noticed to the public. So we invite you to come. We've got a think 2 of our board members won't be there, but their presence will be there. And then 4 of the city council members will be there, although all of them have been invited. That committee makes up 4. And I think the the mayor is coming in, popping in and leaving. So please come in and weigh in and get your questions answered.
Thank you, Board Member Moffitt and Mr. Craig. I just wanted to add to this that, first of all, thank you all for pulling this together. It's taken some while, but here we are. I think just reflecting back on the old ACEs model, and I'm not saying this because I feel like we have to do it the way we've always done it. I think there's always ways to do things differently. But I did have a conversation with President Lindy about the fact that we're both legal entities which have a formal process. So I suggested that he contact is Vice Mayor Kearney about how to conduct from the technical aspects, how to conduct that meeting. So hopefully he'll be able to talk to her about that. And also that while this is our first meeting with a renewed effort around this, that we still as a board needed to really talk at a full board meeting about moving forward, the scope, sort of prioritize our agendas a little bit differently. And like Board Member Bolton is suggesting that we put it on the agenda of transportation. Well, that's something that I feel like has to be mentioned almost in this upcoming meeting because you can't allow too much time. We can't allow too much time to go by without some interaction with them around it. So to talk more about scope and then the process, meaning facilitation of the meeting and what have you. So Mr. Lindy has assured me that he was going to do that, but moving forward, I think it's worthy of a conversation at one of our full board meetings so that we're all on the same page. And I think we have to be clear. I mean, back in the ACES days, it was wherever the meeting was located, it was the president or whoever was their leader facilitated that meeting. Doesn't have to be that way, but I think for the sake of time and just the process of the meeting, that it's important they have that conversation. And good luck trying to talk about all these things in 2 hours. So,
and in all honesty, we've had this conversation before, you and I. We don't have to do everything the way that we've done it before. We have the superintendent coming, and the superintendents previously didn't come. And so I think that this is an opportunity to grow and to be creative and collaborative with the city. And so I think hopefully we will have a great meeting. I don't anticipate that we'll get through all of this, but that's the point, is to start the conversation. And so that's the intention. That's what we're trying to do. And I think the meeting will be great.
I think it will be great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it won't be. But I do, that's why I'm suggesting, okay, so this is a meeting, and I said up front, we don't have to do it the same way. But I do think if you want like for the process to work smoothly, you want the public to respond and whatever, we do have to talk more in detail about what the scope of these meetings involved and understand how to prioritize what we're doing. Because there are things on the agenda that I don't necessarily agree with, but it's okay. I mean, it's okay. Maybe there's a rationale for why a topic or two got on there. But I think we need to decide that as a full board. That's the only thing I was thinking. Mr. Morosky first.
Just a couple comments. I want to commend Mr. Craig, Dr. Moffitt for getting this going. I think it's good. And I think the issues are quite substantive. And I don't think anybody thinks you're going to get through that in 2 hours. If you do, I don't know where. Those are some issues now. And I think that's good. And I'm sorry that I cannot be there. The only thing that I would, if I were like chairing the meeting, which I wouldn't be even if I was there, I think somebody has to your point, somebody has to. This can't just be a free-for-all discussion, particularly for the public's involvement, to your point, Vice President. I would suggest, and just looking at this list, in my head, I can see on the nasty Venn diagram of school district and city government, I can see a couple issues that are gnarly and big enough and important enough to try to solve in the next 3 years. And I don't know if that's the goal of this meeting or if it's to throw spaghetti against the wall. I'm just saying this because this is what I would have said if I was there, and I know you all represent, so I'm not even the least bit worried about it. But just for me, if it could be passed along, whatever, if we can nail that, and I think there's a couple that make sense right away. I mean, transportation, I think, is been an obvious one. Student safety is an obvious one. And the transportation, I should say, just for my part, is inclusive of all of it. The pedestrian safety, our new transportation policies that Dr. Moffitt, Ms. Bolton, and I have worked on all year, that are far more progressive, I think, than a lot of districts. We were talking about ride share, we're talking about walking, we're talking not just buses. I think those things are, and we're talking about driver's education, which, one news outlet reported that we're already discussing, which, is not true, but hey, but still stuff like that is, it's important too. Anyhow, that would be my only 2 cents, but I really appreciate y'all putting this together. And again, I've said this once tonight, I'll say it again, but it bears repeating. That's my thing tonight, I guess. I think we do have a group of elected people in that building that are amenable to our cause and do care about our kids. Mm-hmm. And like us, they need help. We're going out to the community asking for help to help us with our guardrails and our goals and our strategic plans. They need help too. And who better to help them with this than us? So
thank you.
Good luck.
All right. I saw another hand. Bolton.
Yes, I look forward to the meeting. I think if the superintendent's there, I would hope that the city manager would be there as well. And so that works out real well. I think it's all that same parallel stuff, because remembering back on some of the ACEs previously, there was a tendency, and I can specifically remember when these ended. It has something to do with what needs to be renegotiated, to your point on TIF and everything else. That was the last one we had publicly. But I do think it's important that these be successful and that we show collaboration and effort to work with each other. But more particularly, too, I'd like to, how shall I say it? However the topics are worked out, and on that list looks great. There's too many, but there needs to be a city thing and there needs to be a district thing. Or what tends to happen is city starts to dominate, and then we sit here as second-class elected officials, and we actually are elected by more people than they are. We also have a larger geographic whatever, and frankly, we have the number one issue and responsibility in the world, and that's the kids. So I hope if in the next couple of days, can that be ironed out, that there's that sort of parallelism between the city and the district. And I appreciate the efforts that you guys have gone through to do this, and somebody must chair it or it will be ugly.
Yep. Mr. Craig?
Just a quick couple of thoughts with regards to kind of going forward with this also is I think the plan for Dr. Moffitt and I, and again, I'm maybe speaking a little bit out of turn, but is that this initial meeting is really about us understanding what each of us have going on in certain key areas so that we then can start to have the discussion as a board as to where do we want to build those relationships up to work together. Because in some ways, there are some things that we are both doing that we could be doing better together.
Absolutely.
And there are some ways in which we both need each other, to Member Bolton's point. That we are not probably as aligned with each other as we could be, given that they have, 7 new members on city council, and we have 3 new members on our board as well. So I think this first meeting is really supposed to be informative. I tend to agree with everybody here. I will say you, having put this list together and then coming back and looking at it today, there are a few extra bullets that we did not.
We did not add those in there. And to your point,
but to your point, Vice President Jones, this is also why I think when we get to the conversation of facilitating and making our way through, we can iron out some stuff that just we're not going to be able to hit today, but we want to make sure that everybody knows that those are important to us.
Right.
And then other things that we really want to tackle. And so our goal is to have a really great meeting. And then from there, we can start to build that foundation of what we're going to have that relationship be in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Weinberg?
I'm excited about the meeting. I know in previous discussions with both Board Member Moffitt and also Board Member Craig and Vice Mayor, just, bringing this collaboration together, I think for the future will definitely help the kids. I think we should have already had a really good collaboration anyway with the city. And I'm looking forward to the meeting because as Board Member Craig stated, there's so many different topics that we definitely can work on together and move forward. So I'm excited for next Thursday,
Thank you. Just,
this Thursday.
yeah,
It's on my calendar. I will be there.
just one final, I guess it's a question. And this may be more about the process, how the meeting is facilitated. Given that these are both public meetings, legal meetings, with the board and the council, are we required to have a hearing of the public? No, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. That it might be worth considering for the next, and it worked well. That was one of the things that worked well for hearing of the public, as long as we asked them to discuss things that were relative to the agenda, to the shared agenda. But that's a future discussion. Thank you. Okay, anything else around that? Thank you, Dr. Moffitt and Mr. Craig, for the update. Okay, inquiries and updates. Last call. Okay. Assignments? Ms. Bolton.
Yes, I'd like to make an assignment to General Counsel, if I could.
Sure.
Then that is to watch what we're doing with this combined meeting so that we do not break any public meetings, open meetings, because I remember we had to convene and had to take attendance and
They do too.
all that stuff. Well, I'm hoping, they've had some issues along the way, maybe not these particular ones, but we seem to avoid some problems they have. That would be my assignment, that he makes sure that we don't step in it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other assignments? Wonderful. Announcements and kudos. Any announcements?
I have some.
Or kudos. Ms. Bolton, I saw her hand first,
Oh, I'm
and then
sorry.
after you. That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I have a kudo, and I don't have all the audio visual stuff that these two new members have put upon us. I'm going to be talking to Rob about that the next time I have a kudo. I might be showing home movies at this point in time.
Of your dogs?
But yeah, my dogs, my girls. But I don't have, this is, and I will get choked up about this. A friend of mine sent me, and I hadn't opened my mail or my mailbox to get it, but sent me a copy of the College Hill newsletter, neighborhood newsletter called Currents. And on this front page of the Currents were 3 young ladies who are cross-country athletes. And one of them was from Aiken, our rising star that we've already talked about. But the other 2 were from Mercy McCully. And basically the headline was, "Our College Hill girls sweep the division something or other," all that technical regional stuff that the athletic folks, that they called all 3 of those girls College Hill girls. And when I think back, that's what this is really all about. That's what ad hoc's about. That's what buying, Mercy and having Mercy and Macaulay merge, having the community that writes the neighborhood newsletter, think of all of those girls as College Hill girls. I mean, the 2 schools are less than 2 blocks from each other. And it was just fabulous. And when I think back that we were going to tear down Aiken, or that we were afraid to go to the west side and ask them to purchase this high school, and then those folks were able to figure out what to do. I mean, it's just, sometimes you hit a home run. And when I saw that in beautiful pictures, 3 lovely, very fabulous athletes, and they were on those blocks like you had to be on or whatever, I'm just telling you that made more than my day. And these 3 College Hill girls, I don't know that any one of them live in College Hill, but
It's
the
okay.
reality
The
was
schools are.
the schools are in College Hill, center of the universe, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements and or kudos?
So I do have a slide. I just put them all together on a presentation. I'll help you, Board Member Bolton. So Rob's going to put it up. We had a very good, I had a very good day last week. I was able to go with Evanston Academy to GE to meet their mentors. And I got 3 little mentees that told me they would be my partners and that I had to keep in touch with them. So those are my 3 little friends. But GE is a great partner, and they had the kids out to their center and gave them a tour, gave them lunch. And one little boy packed his lunch, and he was like, "Oh man, my mom made me bring my lunch, and you were having lunch. Can I leave this here?" That was really cool, really cool. The same day, but next event was celebrating the Green School at Reese Price Elementary with the mayor and the superintendent and principal mayor. And these are some reading specialists along with Councilwoman Mika Owens. Reese Price is a green school in collaboration with Green Umbrella, et cetera. I was with board member Bolton at a meeting about how to introduce and grow green in our schools, and Reese Price is definitely doing that. The last is the Leading Men Fellowship Partnership. I found out about it with our Donna Murphy and met these that got introduced last year and really, really, really like this program. They are a partnership with Greenlight Fund and the Literacy Lab, and you'll see some of our CPS people there because they have 20 young fellows. They're African American men, age, is it 18 to 26? 18 to 24. And they are in the schools, in the CPS schools, reading as tutors to preschoolers. And they had a wonderful celebration. And so you get to see some of our early elementary ed folks there. That's Leap and Vera and her crew. So just a big, big kudos to everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get everybody's pictures up from the past couple of weeks, but we were able to celebrate a little bit of success that's going on in our district.
Thank you. Mr. Craig?
I just want to give 2 kudos out to anyone who sat through our meeting today in this room because it was extraordinarily hot. I don't know if y'all could tell.
It was.
And then a second kudos to whoever turned the temperature down. If you figured out who that was, y'all deserve the biggest kudos ever.
Saw the fans working.
Personally, I like it because I'm cold.
Any other announcements and kudos? Okay, having no other business, I declare the meeting adjourned. God, I was